We are connected with the superintelligence directly.
Okay.
So initially we had brain chips to give you more memory, additional skills. As that technology improves, at some point it becomes human level and above. At that point, I'm not sure what it is you are contributing to this hybrid system. So right now, yes, you're like, okay, if I tape my phone to my head, I decide who to call. But at some point, you don't contribute much. You just a slow biological coprocessor nobody needs.
Okay, this is UltraSync. I have here Roman Yampolskiy with me, a researcher, a globally leading researcher in the field of artificial intelligence, more specifically superintelligence. He's the author of a book by the same name, Artificial Superintelligence, a Futuristic Approach, and of many articles in the field around artificial general intelligence, the control problem, and other related issues that we're going to get deep into this conversation. So, Roman, thank you so much for being on UltraSync and being here for this conversation with me.
Thanks for inviting me.
So let's before we get into the questions, all these super exciting and interesting questions around the how artificial intelligence will evolve, how humanity is kind of going to co-evolve and control it, and all of the challenges that face us on along this journey. Let's dig a little bit into. Let's find out a little bit about yourself. Like, what made you become a super intelligence researcher? If you just want to give us like a little bit of a glimpse into that kind of the genesis of your thinking, how it emerged from your own experience, I think that would be a good starting point.
Sure. So my background was in security. I was working on biometrics specifically, and I realized that a lot of adversarial agents on the internet are bots, actually. They're not humans. And as AI develops, those adversarial agents, they become better and better. And the question is, where does this all go? And superintelligence is the final point in developing of artificial intelligence. So I wanted to work on the most interesting, most important, most impactful problem. And so far, I haven't found anything more meaningful. If we are successful at controlling superintelligence, that's a meta solution to a lot of problems. Climate change, diseases, aging, all can be addressed with such a useful tool. But if we fail to control it properly, that's also the biggest problem we can possibly face.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, many leading thinkers have pointed out the dangers that we could face there. But before we talk about that, first of all, like, how far are we from artificial general intelligence, AGI? I think somebody like Ray Kurzweil's predictions are still around 2029. That would mean by the end of this decade, and then from there onward it would start the process of kind of recursive self improvement and so on, and then lead to the singularity. But what do you, in your perspective, how far are we?
So that's a hard question. Nobody really knows, and it's not obvious that we can accurately predict it. Kurzweil says 2029, 2045, and that makes sense. It would be surprising if it didn't happen. At this point, given that we are getting good returns on just investing into compute and more data, it's not a question of time, but a question of how much. If you spend enough money, you can probably get to it very quickly. Maybe we're not willing to spend that kind of money. I heard people say as soon as 5 to 7 years from now, but for the sake of argument, let's say 2045 to have some time to actually address this problem.
So this would be for full-fledged superintelligence, meaning the development of an intelligence which is far superior to us in every single way, like that. That's or is are you referring to a human-like artificial general intelligence when you say to 2045?
I don't think there is much difference in terms of timelines. Once you get to human level ability to do science and engineering, you almost instantaneously get super intelligence.
Right. So what we can agree on is that it's within very clearly within the horizon of what we can anticipate and plan for, and within our lifetimes and so on. And it's not
It's our
something
problem. It's not
it's
somebody else's
our time,
problem. We
our
have to work
lifetime's
on it.
problem, and not some future generation's problem, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, so okay, so the control problem, uh, obviously it's a common trope of science fiction, and like some of the most successful science fiction is around the machines taking over, the machines kind of not being aligned with our interests, doing their enslaving us, whether you think of the Skynet or the Matrix trilogy or whatnot. So, but you're obviously looking at this from the most rigorous scientific perspective possible of this problem. And what's your take on where we are currently with regards to our capacity to control a potential artificial superintelligence once it arises?
Level zero. We have no idea how to do it. All the research on AI safety is really about mapping the landscape of possible problems, side effects, what to be concerned about. Uh, we have some good tools for dealing with narrow AI, but I don't think there is anything which is likely to scale to even human level performance, much less above that.
So you're saying that the existing research paradigms or perspectives or projects that exist, they're still far away from having any type of workable solution.
I don't think there is any prototypes or ideas. I don't think there is anyone who's claiming we have a solution. We just need, $10 more and we'll implement it or anything like that. There is just nothing out there.
But people do spend money on AI safety.
They do, but that term is very broad. So narrow problems with modern AIs, bias, technological unemployment, things like that all fall under it. And there is a lot of work and a lot of progress in narrow AI systems for sure.
Right. Okay. So you're saying for that bigger problem of how we would actually, be controlled. Can you actually state, from in your words, maybe that would be, I think, for the benefit of the viewers, listeners. Can you state in your words why it's such an urgent problem? What would it mean if we do not tackle the control problem?
So we'll eventually pass a lot of responsibilities to intelligent systems. We already have in many domains. Stock market is almost fully autonomous. Very few trades are human traders. Most of it is bots. Our airline industry is controlled by machines. Nuclear response is automated. So almost everything is controlled by AIs of today, which are really, really dumb. As we have developed some more advanced systems, they will be put in charge of those systems, and we don't know how to fully control what they might do in different situations. So we're no longer in charge, essentially, once that happens. Something else, something more intelligent and possibly with very different preferences and different common sense would be making decisions about us.
But these seem to be all localized systems that you mentioned. A system that runs airline that runs aviation, or a system that runs whatever traffic, or deals with a certain climate issue and so on. So these all seem to be like localized uh, systems. Are we actually talking about some kind of master or meta system which would develop its own which would that's a question that I often have for myself when I hear the conversation around dangers, existential risks around superintelligence, or and so on, around artificial superintelligence systems specifically. So they would have to acquire that capacity first to control everything. We would have to give them that capacity first, or is the idea there that the system that artificial intelligence would by on its own acquire that capacity to control like all of these systems, as apart from just the localized, limited box or place where we have built it or set it up?
Well, first, things like stock market and nuclear response are not that local. The whole planet will be impacted right away. If we do get to human level performance, then the systems can learn just like we learn. It can quickly pick up much quicker than we can capabilities to work in those other domains. That's the whole point of general in AI. It can learn new tricks without being explicitly taught how to do it.
Okay, so we could, so those are critical systems, critical importance for the survival of the planet, and they are, the idea is that they could be or would be at some point controlled by artificial intelligences, which are not necessarily doing what we want them to do,
Right.
right?
And we don't really know how it may misbehave, but it's unlikely that without explicit work, it will do exactly what we would see as a good outcome.
Right. And then obviously you have some of these, some a little bit speculative scenarios where, what if the artificial intelligence decides to turn the whole planet into a paperclip or whatever, something like that. I mean, there seems to some of these scenarios seem to be a bit, like speculative, hypothetical thought experiments or something, rather than actual, actual risks that we as a society would prepare for politically and socially, and that we could actually mobilize, people to spend money on and to do something about. Like, what do you think as a let's say, like a more realistic risk scenario could look like in practice?
So I think those examples are just used as teaching tools to kind of illustrate how different the thinking would be. Replace paper clips with something you might actually like, Bitcoin, right? The whole point is to convert universe into Bitcoin mining hardware. That makes as much sense as anything humans do, so that could happen.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So basically, yeah, we're saying there is around things that even we could perceive to be valuable. There would be a danger of exaggerating those or excessively developing those if there is a system in control that we don't. But I mean, humans could do that as well. I mean, we're talking here about something that, I mean, do we have control or alignment with humans right now? Do humans have alignment or control within our different systems that we have? No, we don't.
That's a great point, and I bring it up a lot. Humans are not safe. The good thing is, all humans are mortal. All humans have limited capabilities. So the dictators will die. The super rich still need to sleep. None of those limitations are limitations for AI. So they would be much more capable. And so, if the worst human you can think in history can kill 100 million people, now you're talking about something capable of killing 8 billion people.
Okay, so the problem is clearly a problem. Now, and you're saying the thinking that currently exists around how we can control this problem, you said it's at zero. Is that a bit of a pessimistic assessment? Is there a way to have a more, if you were is there a way to have a more generous assessment and find actually some approaches that could potentially like be useful for us? Or
Point oh 0.01, if it
okay,
makes
what's
you
the
feel
point oh
better.
one? Like, can you tell us
So
about the point oh one?
we're starting to think that we might understand what we want, but we don't know how to do it. We don't agree on what it is we want. So value alignment, for example, can we make those systems want what humans want? Okay, that seems reasonable, but who are we talking about? You, me, North Korea? There is a lot of different humans who don't agree on anything. And
Hmm.
with 8 billion different people, you can throw animals into that. There is a lot of misalignment even within humans.
Mhm.
If we were to somehow agree on something, then it's not obvious how to make it dynamically change. So you don't want to be in a static state. You don't want 1800s to dominate forever. Same with 2022. You don't want this mentality of what we are doing today as humans, which is pretty crazy with wars and other problems, to become our standard ethics forever. So there has to be a mechanism for updating it and changing it. as we get smarter. But the point is, if a system is smarter, it decides for us what we should want, what the ethics should be. And we're very unlikely to be happy when someone comes and says, well, what you really want is some completely obscure thing we don't care about.
Right. So the alignment is that, alignment with values. The problem there is that we don't have an agreed on procedure to to do that even within ourselves right now, right? Like
If you
that's
look at history of philosophy and ethics, it's 2 millennia of people disagreeing with each other. That's all it is.
Yeah, but is that like I've seen also where you elsewhere argue for the alignment problem being maybe misstated because people trying to solve alignment, but we don't even know what alignment is, or even alignment is even possible. But my question is here: is alignment not possible in principle, or is it just practically currently not possible from your perspective? Are you saying it's just in principle not categorically not possible?
Well, then we try to formalize it. We don't have fixed set of values. We don't agree on any set of values. Our values change, and if we had set fixed agreed on set of values, modern programming languages don't support coding it up. There is no coding concept for good. You cannot say make this good. So those terms are not well defined. So worse yet, even if you had two perfectly aligned agents to the point where they are identical, that doesn't guarantee cooperation. You still have selfishness as a factor. So from game theoretic point of view, even if you manage to put your code into my head and everyone else's head, we'd still fight over resources.
Yes, but we could have an agreed upon procedure for how to solve those disputes, right? And that procedure could be one by which the artificial intelligences are bound as well.
Agreements work really well between agents of equal power. If we can self-destruct, we kind of learn to play well together. The moment there is a super powerful agent, it no longer has to abide by the rules.
Yeah, I'll get back to this point in a bit. Just to still stay on the point of alignment, because my thinking there was that, obviously right now in today's world, we don't even have alignment between anybody. Like we don't geopolitically, we have like a whole a new block of China and Russia not being aligned with the West. We have internally inside societies, people, many people say that inside societies there is not necessarily alignment between the super rich or the kind of the more privileged classes, and then the masses of the people, right? So that's another dimension where we don't necessarily have a full alignment. But what if we had what if there was a state where we had a planetary federation where all of humanity was in one kind of political construct, and there was some real democracy, some real kind of process of inclusion and empowerment of this and deliberation and decision making that includes everybody, right? So if that state was there, we would we would be would it still be impossible for us to have alignment with our machines that we're creating?
So as I said, even if you had perfect alignment, you'd still have competition for limited resources. The selfish aspect of it doesn't change. If I was able to clone myself and make 20 copies who I know are just like me, feel pain just like me, I'd still want my house and my wife for me, not for them. So that competition doesn't go away. And you bringing up this misalignment at level of nations and planet as a whole, look internally. I want to eat carrots and exercise instead I eat donuts and watch TV. So there is even internal misalignment at level of one agent.
But alignment does not necessarily mean that we want everybody to have the same view or everybody to own the same house or something, right? Like it doesn't, like it's perfect. I mean, individual agents that have different preferences and that are that have different pathways and different trajectories and even different information knowledge, they can still be obviously perfectly aligned. They can be aligned in a system that's overall harmonious. Like, we don't need them to all agree on the same thing.
We need to agree on things we are competing over, right? Otherwise, it's not obvious how this competition is resolved. So in a democracy, you basically have what we call in crypto world 51% attack, where a tiny majority dominates the other half. And this could be a permanent state if you say, okay, those are the values we're going to go by for forever. 49% will suffer under that system because we have democracy.
I mean, this is obviously something that people who are now creating DAOs are really tackling and struggling with as well, because they're thinking, look, we're setting up organizations that are supposed to be more suitable for the digital age, and how do we exactly prevent that from happening? So all kinds of safeguards and layers and extra mechanisms that people are developing, procedures, protocols that people are developing to prevent that. But yeah, I mean, we don't have the perfect solution for that, but in the design of a more perfect or more harmonious kind of whole system, that AIs could help us design that, basically.
They can also hack those smart contracts much better. Every day we hear, okay, $500 million drained from this DAO or that DAO. Every day happens, right? And this is humans finding errors in simple if statements in a smart contract. If you have superintelligence and you have a large complex code governing the whole society, I wouldn't bet on it being foolproof.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, yeah, we have to, in some ways, develop ethical superintelligences, or like superintelligences that I mean, it's this. I mean, we haven't eliminated destructive behavior or cancerous behavior from human history at all. Like, just look back at the last whatever 100 years or something, like how many times humanity like almost
Today,
destroyed.
you don't have to look in the past. Today, look around the world.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe that's just a kind of a principle of life. Like, life has that tendency to have these self-destructive phases, or yeah, like these kind of uh these kind of tendencies which happen in it. But maybe those tendencies in the bigger picture have a function too, because like there's in economics, you have creative destruction, for instance, right? In many wisdom traditions, you have the idea of destruction as being like one part with creation. In the Indian whatever, you have like Shiva as destroyer and creator and so on, right? So I mean, maybe it's like, maybe we can't, it's maybe we're even wrong to try to create like the ultimate friendly, super nice kind of AI, because like that's just not what life is. Like, maybe we have to just be okay with a certain level of risk and a certain level of destructive potential, as long as that's embedded in something larger, that's harmonious, and something larger that we have some confidence that we can just generate that harmony together.
So that's what happens. You shift from individual to benefit of society, and that's what Soviet Union, North Korea, all those countries came up with. So there could be some side effects.
What do you mean?
Look at those societies where individual is not important, but the good of society matters. Are they desirable places to be?
Yeah, so you mean, yeah, obviously, like if you go all that far and do it like in a totalitarian way, it's obviously like dangerous. But yeah, I mean, any society, I would say any society has obviously its mechanisms and its systems of creating social cohesion and social harmony, right? uh, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. It's like there's so much that in this, which you're working on algorithms and formal logical systems, but actually, in some ways, actually, the you're also talking about the very deep ethical and philosophical questions about the nature of existence, what's good, what's not good, what's evil, or if there is anything like that. That's somehow, that's I find that so fascinating, like that those questions are there just beneath the surface. Do other people in who are working in on artificial intelligence and computer sciences, in your experience, have are they open and to this dimension of the conversation, or is it something that it's marginal within the field?
So the AI safety community takes it very seriously. Decision theory, political science, philosophy, ethics. The standard AI developer community may be less exposed to it because we don't have that issue. They have very specific engineering problems we're working on. But at the end of the day, we all get a PhD, a doctor of philosophy, right? So you can see computer science as applied philosophy. I don't just talk about it, I can run an experiment. Okay, you have an idea, let's run it, see if it works.
Yeah, and that could even be obviously inside a simulation. The closer we get to being able to create actual kind of, very complex simulations where the complexity is similar to life, that would mean that we could actually try out even different systems within those simulations, and we could see whether those systems, whether this solution works, whether maybe proposals for the control problem work within a simulation. Is that one of the pathways as well that's being discussed?
Well, certainly, yes, and that's why simulation hypothesis is so frequently brought up in those scenarios. Are we in a simulation already? Maybe we're being tested for whatever we are friendly or not. And when you have a pandemic and a World War III at the same time, you start to think maybe it's not a standard setup.
Yeah. So how are we doing on the test in your mind?
They're still running it, so I guess we're doing all right. They would shut it down if it was really bad.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting perspective. Another point that I'd like to talk about is when we're talking about super intelligence as being so vastly superior to us. Where the one perspective that in those debates I don't find often represented, not often enough, I think. I mean, I think, I'm in your book you did mention it, as I think you even mentioned it as the only viable solution, but in my mind it's kind of self-evident that we would not stay humans. We would not just be the same humans that we are now while artificial intelligence has become super intelligent, and then we have to be protected basically from these kind of vastly superior beings. Why would we not become those beings? Why would we not, why even in the process of making them would we not just necessarily have to become them, but through brain computer interface and whole brain emulation and all kinds of other kind of, I mean, even isn't even the pathway to artificial super intelligence, the most of the existing proposed pathways do to a strong extent work with enhancing our brains or copying our brains or learning from our brains, or in some ways, like even to get to artificial superintelligence, we would have to necessarily learn also how to enhance the brain. Like we can't even get there without enhancing the brain.
Right, but it doesn't guarantee that it's a safe option. So neuroscience is definitely what's feeding right now a lot of our progress in AI. But if you take any human being, and we talked about in one of the papers, who would you upload first, right? You want to pick someone very nice. Uh, Power corrupts. I wouldn't upload myself because I know, given enough resources, I would not be as nice as I am today. And it's true for anyone. Then you have this godlike powers. You are immortal. You can copy yourself at will. You have very different preferences and goals than you do today.
But you're talking about uploading now, the person.
Uploading, making a copy of that individual as a seed for intelligence, maybe for later enhancement. So that's one of the options. Some people talk about creating hybrids. So you add a super intelligent chip to your brain, in that case, it's not obvious what you contribute to that relationship. You're just a bottleneck. You have bad memory and weird desires, so you quickly get removed from the system, if not explicitly, at least implicitly.
That's interesting now that you're saying this, because obviously, I mean, that's in many ways probably we're closer to that than to uploading, right? Because we are starting with brain computer interfaces, and so on. Neuralink is starting to have like its human trials already this year. There's various other kind of people in that space that are coming out with at least promising approaches, right? And in some ways we're closer there to than on the side of like emulating or uploading, completely copying a connectome and then emulating it somewhere. So does that, this enhancing of the brain, you're just saying right now, if we are able to learn to enhance ourselves through connecting with the web, with external computational resources and so on, we would become redundant. Basically, we would not be necessary anymore. Like,
if we are connected with a superintelligence directly.
Okay.
So initially we had brain chips to give you more memory, additional skills. As that technology improves, at some point it becomes human level and above. At that point, I'm not sure what it is you are contributing to this hybrid system. So right now, yes, you're like, okay, if I tape my phone to my head, I decide who to call. But at some point, you don't contribute much. You're just a slow biological coprocessor nobody needs.
Is there something, maybe, I mean, I'm not trying to kind of say that, some kind of romantic idea of humans as having some kind of whatever, some kind of higher essence or something, but not, I'm not trying to go that way. But is there still not very much still in humans, in our human consciousness and in our human intelligence and consciousness that we have? And I'm not, I know they're different terms, but just like for the sake of the argument right now, isn't there something in there that goes beyond, or that is still more powerful and wider than just functional intelligence of the instrumental kind, of the, like, an ends to a mean kind of kind, just intelligence that's really good at playing chess, for instance, right? Like, isn't there something in our consciousness that is still beyond that type of intelligence?
Objectively, from external point of view, or subjectively from human point of view? So we might feel we are very special and should be preserved. Would a superintelligent system find us useful for a specific task? So you say we have those very broad,
Like,
magical,
let's call it
biological-
wisdom. Let's call it wisdom, sapiens.
Right, but if we're talking about superintelligence, it's wiser and more intelligent.
Is
dominates
sapiens
than
the same thing as intelligence?
Give me a specific skill, specific ability only a human can do, and AI would not be able to do. If you can name one, then yes, that's something to keep you around for.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
You are very special. You should be preserved.
No, I mean, it's not. I don't want to preserve humanity necessarily. I want us to merge with the technology and become something different. I want us to upgrade and just leave the human behind and become
But
the next level.
Side effect is extinction, right? If you think about Neanderthals, they don't exist anymore. Are they happy that they evolved into us? Maybe not so much.
It is extinction in a way. I mean, but it's not. I mean, extinction has the connotation of leaving no trace behind, whereas, neo-speciation is probably the better term, because we will become a new species, like a higher species.
But it's good for them, not so much for us.
But they will be us, like they will be our descendants.
Like, do you remember your great-great-grandfather? You might have a picture somewhere, you look at it, oh, that's kind of cute, but there is nothing left.
Yeah. I'm fine with that. I have to say, like, I would be fine with being like one
And
piece.
some people
the
are,
chain.
and they see it as progress. From point of view of a universe, yes, it's an improvement.
Yeah.
But there is still possibility of having one bias is still allowed, you can be pro-human. And I think a lot of people still are pro-human. And to have value alignment, we all have to agree that we don't care about humans, let's move on. And I think
Yeah.
there is a lot of people who don't agree.
I think we have to be pro post-human. We have to be pro next level human. But
And
yeah,
this is the war of the future, where you have those who want to become something else and those who, conservatives and progressives, right? Same thing, nothing changes. Some people want to stay us, and someone else wants better for universe.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And obviously the question of how we deal with the artificial intelligences that we are creating is totally central to that. The robots. I mean, on a very kind of practical level, it's very likely that by the end of this decade, we're going to be surrounded by, autonomous objects and autonomous vehicles and drones and so on and so forth everywhere, basically, like robots that are doing labor and so on and so forth. So yeah, so I mean, how do you see then the future? I mean, the immediate future, not even the distant future, in the next kind of in the coming time of getting from that 0.1% of advancement in control to 20% to 40% to 50% and so on and so forth. Like how do you see that advance?
I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's a solvable problem. I think you're right. We're going to lose humanity and be replaced to become something else.
You think it's just not possible? Like,
I don't think it's possible for lower level intelligence to control indefinitely, not part time. Higher level intelligence, we're just not that smart.
what if we simultaneously enhance ourselves and become more intelligent as we're figuring out the problem?
The result is the same. Humans are gone, and there is some super intelligent, biological or not biological set of agents out there. But the result is the same. This is over.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, the control problem is the control is not trying to lock us into our current stage in evolution, right? I mean, Homo sapiens is just a tiny blip in the evolutionary history. Like, why would we want to stay here? It's like
Because we have a pro-human bias. We are us. Like, I don't know your situation, but let's say your wife finds a better guy, more money, better looking, better lover. Are you happy for her? Yeah, let's replace you with him. Everyone wins except you. That's the situation. And some people are
that's
so
an interesting
altruistic, they go,
perspective.
oh, good for them, let's do that. But I'm selfish.
Well, but I think there's a way to make this argument, my argument, from an enlightened, selfish, enlightened, self-interest type of perspective too, because you're saying it won't be us anymore, but in what we can at least see in the coming 10, 20 years, and from 29 to 45, let's say, in that span, right? It will still very much be you and me. I mean, we will be able to go and buy the ultimate level of the neural link and implant it, and we will be able to get nanobots to come and to connect us, to upgrade us, and so on and so forth. So that will still be there will still be a continuity between the me who was born in 1982 and then that being which is now connected and upgraded. Like, there will still be a very clear continuity, right? It won't be somebody else who's running away with my wife, right? Like,
You're right. And this is what the personal identity problem in philosophy is. Is it still you if you make changes slowly over time versus quickly overnight? But the outcome is the same.
yeah, at the end, I mean, death has so far always been inevitable anyway. So
But this is where we're hoping to make progress as well. So maybe we can live much longer as us in some modified biological form, but preserving at least the mental state.
do you think life extension is desirable? Or, I mean, this is just following up on this, or would you think that some kind of immaterial mind upload, that would not be something that you would think would be desirable? You would think
So
life extension of the biological carrier would be desirable?
I think it's the best option right now because the magical aspects of human biology you mentioned are only likely to be preserved in that. It's good to have a cloud backup in case something happens to the biology, so I support that as well.
Okay. A cloud backup of our minds, basically.
At least memory states, preferences, that anything you can lose in amnesia causing accident.
Interesting. So this actually brings me to another question around a field of inquiry that you have proposed and suggested, which is intellectology. And so the way I understand it is that this is kind of an endeavor to map and understand the entire field of all possible minds, or of all the set of all possible minds. Is that would that be a correct kind of
It's pretty close. So
approach?
we have so many different domains: psychology, computer science, philosophy, many others, all trying to look at intelligence, minds, how to create them, measure them, detect them, do they have consciousness? But they all do it from different perspectives with different tools, different terminology. It makes sense to bring it together into one field of science, which can benefit from having this cross pollination. So neuroscience and AI, computer science are definitely now coming close together. They use same terms, they run same experiments, and that produced amazing benefits. Make it even more global. We want to be able to talk about this from common language, common models, sharing tools. It seems like a very important area of research. And then things like AI become a small subset of this bigger field. How do we create intelligence in computers, for example, formally, versus biology is another area studying biology-based intelligences.
What else would there be in that field, in this, the space of all minds? If you're saying that AIs and human biological intelligences are a small part of that, what else is in that? Like, how can we imagine that space, that to be
So
filled, basically?
that's the research question. We can talk about what's possible, what are the limits to superintelligence and capability. Also, kind of reversing this process. If you have some artifact created by intelligence, what can you say about the designer? So usually it's kind of theological questions. You look at the world. What can you talk about God? Say properties of God, but it's not very scientific. If you create a computer simulation and you look at the code, you look at the physics engine, what can you say about the programmer? So that becomes much more scientific, much more formal, and we're starting to see it a lot with AI forensics. So you used to investigate who committed this crime, and you can find fingerprints, you can find blood. Then bots and computer viruses commit illegal activities. Now you're investigating AIs for it. You're looking for forensic signatures. So all that kind of becomes part of this new field.
Mhm. Would the field of astrobiology at some point flow into this field as well, when we have like other life forms and their
At
form of
least
intelligence?
with respect to intelligent life, for sure. So if it's purely cell-based, not so intelligent, maybe it's less connected. But yeah, alien minds definitely would be an interesting property. Would similar intelligences evolve on other planets, or would they be completely different?
Can we solve this question, or can we even do this investigation of all minds without talking about consciousness?
It's a limiting factor. It would be a boring conversation. Consciousness seems to be so fundamental to what we are and what we care about. I would keep it.
That means you would keep
We
it.
should study consciousness as part of it, absolutely. Why some agents are conscious? Are there degrees of consciousness? Is it binary? All of it seems fundamental to this field.
Right. Yeah. I mean, is the question, is what I've just brought up before of sapiens as, are there, I mean, I'm not fully, I haven't researched this in any ways, but is there like a field of artificial sapience or artificial wisdom or artificial, you know, is that a field of research as
I
well?
haven't seen a separate field of artificial wisdom. The term has been used, but usually it's consciousness and intelligence as the two things we look at. If you give me a definition, what
Yeah,
differentiates wisdom from intelligence, maybe we can
sure.
get into it.
Because what I'm thinking, there is a lot of philosophical traditions. They speak of, Hegelian philosophy, Platonic philosophy before it, and so on and so forth, but a lot of different world wisdom traditions too. If you look at Indian philosophy and so on, they speak of these different levels of consciousness.
Mhm.
And in those levels of consciousness, in functional intelligence, intelligence that is basically instrumental, goal oriented, that can get things done and so on, is one level in the evolution of consciousness. And then there are higher levels of consciousness, which are like all encompassing wisdom or all encompassing awareness of, which is kind of non-verbal, or there's different ways that people express that, or that people kind of present those classifications. But my thinking is, you know is there, and this would also mean, like, if we had machines that are conscious, and that are, that can acquire that higher level of consciousness, would that also solve the control problem in some ways? Could we have like enlightened machines?
It can make it worse. I mean, if that machine is that conscious and we are end conscious, maybe it would be less likely to give us good treatment, just like we don't always provide good treatment to bugs and such. So it's not obvious that that's a benefit.
That's true.
Any power differential makes it more dangerous. You want to be closer to equality.
That's true. That's true. I mean, yeah, or at least we want to have a process of how we can climb together, go up together, like with the machines. Yeah. Wonderful. Great. So yeah, I think this I could talk for ages about all of these topics, but I think I'd like, it would be great to keep this episode like so concentrated and powerful as we had it already. There was so many great things in there in this conversation that we had. Roman, what would you say? I'd like to kind of come towards the end, to a place where my guest can have a message for humanity. What would be your message for humanity, that, if you could say something that, that would be received by a large number of people, like, let's say you could kind of directly speak to the universal consciousness of the planet, what would that be?
So we always want to have options to undo our decisions. If we make something where it can no longer be undone and we are unhappy with it, it's a big problem. So if we just decide, let's create superintelligence as quickly as possible and we'll figure it out later how to control it, that may backfire. So I would suggest anyone smart enough to work on cutting AGI, take the time to see if this is what you want to do. And if you have a safety mechanism in place which works and scales to any level of performance your system can achieve. I think that's the best safety mechanism we can come up with, where those capable of doing this self-regulating, because you will not benefit from uncontrolled superintelligence. You'll just be the first closest victim to that system. You will not have dominating impact on others. Being first is not an advantage in that domain.
Right. So you want the brightest minds basically to come and contribute to solving this problem, and that's out of enlightened self-interest, basically,
Exactly.
out of a larger understanding of self-interest. So that's wonderful. I can't let this go though, but without just because of the current world situation that we're in. Is it likely though that different states start to develop this technology, and then and then try to get like strategic advantages, military advantages out of it, right? And would those people that are in power to do that, would they understand this kind of larger perspective that we just pointed to, or would that be able to override the need for, okay, but I need a strategic advantage right now for my geopolitical bloc, and I don't care about what you just said. Like, would
Yeah.
that?
Historically, it seems that military needs will outweigh any caution. So we have a competition for developing military AI. All the big players, US, China, Russia, are trying to get there. Putin explicitly said whoever creates AI at that level will control the world. So it's definitely very concerning that we pair weaponization with research on AI.
Which could have dire consequences for humanity, for all of humanity, basically.
Absolutely.
I think we have some exciting times ahead, some exciting years as kind of things exponentially take up and we go closer towards the singularity. Probably the most eventful and exciting time in human history is upon us. And I hope that we can continue this conversation. We just started UltraSync. I'm so happy to have had you, Roman, as one of the first guests. I should say probably Professor, but I've been very kind of informal. But as one of the first from our new format, but there's going to be so much more. So if you're listening to this and if you're viewing this, subscribe and make sure to be part of this. And once again, thank you so much for your time. And I hope we make some progress towards the control problem.
Thanks for inviting me. It was a great conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Sync yourself up, everybody. Thank you.